Okay, hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Victor, and I'm going to be your anchor for this series. Okay, so this is going to be the CompTIA PenTest Plus certification series. Okay, so on the channel, we have a series that is an abridged version of the CompTIA, that is the PT0-002 exam. So here we're going to be looking at the objectives. So it's very crucial that if you're preparing for exam, if you want to understand most of the concepts in the exam and some of the learnings, the benefits of the exam, that you have an understanding of the curriculum. So to pass an exam, you're always going to study with the curriculum. So the curriculum tells what's expected of you, what you should know, what the key objectives are, what tools, what principles, what concepts you need to be able to understand for you to be able to pass the exam. Okay, so on our journey, averagely on a 30 days journey to be able to pass the exam, so we're going to be going through some nuggets. So the very first one is for us to actually understand the CompTIA PenTest certification exam objectives. So Saltec, via our subsidiary, Clark Technology Limited, is an accredited CompTIA partner, delivery partner. So you want to take your exams, you want to take certifications, so you could check up, contact us and get guidelines, preparations for your CompTIA PenTest exams. So, but let's start this by going through these objectives. Now, don't forget that the CompTIA PenTest exam is an intermediate level cybersecurity certification, so it's not entry level. The assumption is that, okay, you've had some years of experience doing vulnerability assessments, doing basic code analysis, doing some pen testing, or basically you have spent some time doing entry level cybersecurity analyst role, task and job. Or even if you're freelancing, you should have some experience before getting to do this course. If you feel that you can catch up, we have the S Plus series and also the Cisco Cyber Ops series. You can go through that and also catch up with this curriculum. Okay, so let's look at the core of the exam. So the exam, you have about maximum of 85 questions. It's also multiple choice and performance based. So it's typically you have a long set of text. Then you are to choose options, either choose the best answer or choose multiple options, or you're going to be checked to see how well you do with respect to the exam objectives. And of course, the passing score is 750 on the scale of 100 to 900. Okay, so we have 5 parts or 5 domains. Now, you see the most important domain. When I say important, I mean which of the domain is going to have more of the questions or which is going to have more weight in the exam. So it's attacks and exploits, followed by information gathering and vulnerability scanning, followed by reporting and communication, followed by tools and code analysis, then followed by planning and scoping. So the pen test certification, it's a cybersecurity plus project management duo. It's like you learning how to carry out pen test vulnerability assessment in a very strategic, in a very orderly manner. So you're going to be looking at conversing with stakeholders, atomizing your scope, your budget, time, resources. All of that goes into understanding what it means to be a pen tester or what it means to be a vulnerability assessment analyst. Now, you need to be able to understand that to pass the exam, a lot of skill sets are needed from you. So, and that's what we're going to be highlighting throughout this process. So we're going to pick each of the knowledge area or each of the module or each of the domains. I'm going to highlight some of the key important aspects of this certification. So in the first one, which is planning and scoping. So the question is, what is pen testing? So pen testing is trying to simulate an attack on a vulnerable target. So if you need to do penetration testing, the first thing you do is first do a security audit. After a security audit, you now want to do a vulnerability assessment. After a vulnerability assessment, you now want to do a penetration testing. So, but before you do all of this, one of the first things you want to do is first plan and scope. This is synonymous to project management skill set, in the sense that if you're going to carry out any project, one of the things you want to do is say, what do I want to do? How do I want to do? What are the standards do I need to follow? Do I just start up and just start pen testing? No, it doesn't happen that way. There's a lot of methodology, there's a lot of plan, there's a lot of strategy that you need to explore in order to become a better pen tester. Because here, you're not doing stuff in just one regular box or one regular machine or one regular system or whatever. No, you are doing this mostly in an enterprise, in a small business, in a corporate environment. So there's a lot of things to consider if you want to do pen testing, if you want to do vulnerability assessment. So that's why you need to first plan and scope. And in planning and scoping, what are the things you should know? You should be able to compare and contrast governance, risks, and compliance. So here you have GRC. So GRC is saying, okay, what is the government saying about how we should do stuff? What we shouldn't do? What we should do? How we should do it? The C-level executives, the mid-level executives, the team members, the analysts, the testers, what is the structure of how we should carry out whatever we should carry out? Then what's the risk that is going to be involved in doing whatever we're doing? There's going to be some level of risks. How do we measure the risks? Is it going to be some quantitative risk assessment? Is it going to be some qualitative risk assessment? They're also going to be looking at compliance. So compliance, are we going to comply to which regulation? If we're in banking, there are some standards that we should comply to. If we're in healthcare, there are some standards we should comply to. If we're just a regular consulting firm or a school or there's an industry, we still have standards. So we want to look at them. So one of the very first one is regulatory compliance consideration. So for this exam, you should be able to understand 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different types of laws, different types of regulations that have to do with risks, that have to do with compliance, that have to do with governance in terms of cybersecurity. So amongst them is PCI DSS, which have to do with payment card. If somebody is to do or process payments, that's the person is to maybe collect payment data, is to process it, is to store it, is to transfer it, is to process it. How should the person do that with respect to card information? Same thing with the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. That's an EU regulation that is adopted by most countries. Even most countries are going to have their own limitations. How you should do stuff, how you shouldn't do stuff. Which kind of tools can you use? Which kind of tools you shouldn't use? What are the local laws? What applies in Ghana, in US, in Gambia, in South Africa, in the UK is going to be slightly adaptable. It's going to be slightly different because each law, each country is going to domesticate most of these regulations. Then you need to understand that before you go ahead to like start any vulnerability assessment or penetration testing, you need to have some kind of service level agreement. You need to have a documentation of what you're going to do and what's going to be the content of what you're going to do, right? You need to state it out clearly in an SLA. Then, of course, confidentiality. Most of the times, there needs to be some kind of secrecy to the kind of things you're going to do for an organization. So you don't do something for an organization and do a vulnerability assessment or a pen testing, and you go to the second organization and say, okay, this is what I did for this guy, this is what I did for this guy, this is what was vulnerable, this was what was vulnerable, especially in plain text. So you cannot do that. So you need to understand this because, like I said, we're dealing with corporate organizations. Statement of work. So what are you going to do? SOW at times we call it. At times we call it scope document. So you need to understand in clear terms what and what are you going to be doing. Then a non-disclosure agreement and a master service agreement. And of course, you need to have a permission to attack. So it's like a passport. It's like a go ahead. So you don't just start penetrating. You don't just start running vulnerability assessment. There must be like permission. Then in 1.2, you need to be able to explain the importance of scoping, right? So because you have several standards, several methodologies, several guidelines, several ways that this vulnerability assessment, this penetration testing can be done. So you have the mid-terrain attack, you have the OWASP Top 10, you have the NIST framework, you have the OSSTMM, you have the PTES, you have the ISAF. They also have something that has to do with the mobile security framework. All of these frameworks are just documentations, guidelines that tells you how to do pen testing, how to do vulnerability assessment in different types of environment. It's like a workbook. It's like a guideline on what to do, how to do it, what tool to use, and the rest. So the question is, if you're going to do your vulnerability assessment and your penetration testing, which are you going to use? Are you doing a web application testing? Are you doing a network testing? Are you doing a mobile application security testing? Are you just doing an overall testing? So which of these guidelines and methodologies are you going to be using? Or which combination are you going to be using? So this is what is addressed by all of these standards. And here in rules of engagement, you want to understand for your exam, take up questions that have to do with rules of engagement. So what time of the day? There was a time we were to do a pen testing for an organization. And some of the conversations we had at the initial stage was going to be, are you going to be doing this at peak periods, off-peak periods, late at night, at wee hours, very early in the morning? You need to be certain. If not, you can disrupt business activities. Imagine doing a pen testing for a portal that is a recruitment application, and there is an active recruitment ongoing. The question is, what time of the day are you going to have off-peak period? Or are you trying to test something that is actually in progress? Then, in the scope document, you need to ascertain what is going to be allowed and what is not going to be allowed. Most of the times, the company that is going to be engaging you or your firm is going to say, okay, I think you shouldn't touch this infrastructure. You shouldn't touch this particular network. This is very, very, we're going to decide a time of the year we're going to do this, because if not, it can hamper a lot of things happening in the organization. So please don't touch this, right? So you can say, okay, you can touch this, you can try to attack this and see if it is vulnerable and see if it is all of that. So there's need to be rules of engagement. And of course, the question is always going to be environments. Which environment? You don't just say, I want to do pen testing. So the point is it going to be web? Is it going to be network? Is it going to be cloud? Is it going to be social engineering? Is it going to be people? Because you can be doing penetration testing, vulnerability assessment for people. You can be documents, like your procedures, your policies. You can be auditing that. You're trying to look for loopholes within that. Then target lists, right? So there must be a list of targets, and that's going to tell how much time you're going to spend. That's going to tell what the budget is going to be. That's going to tell the strategy you're going to explore. That's going to tell how many team members you're going to need. That's going to tell what expertise that is going to be necessary. That's going to tell what methodology or standard you're also going to be looking at. So the target is very crucial. You can be coming to do just wireless network penetration testing. You can be coming to do IP or domains or just application, the APIs that is interacting within a software and a mobile app, right? Or it can be the physical locations. You want to see whether is it possible that people can penetrate this organization and pick up information or interact or collect data. Is it possible, or is it the domain name service or domain name system or their web application or their local systems, right? So there must be target list and scope asset. Then validate scope of engagement. Now, the thing is that even when you have a written document to tell all of these things, it needs to be validated. So this is a concept from project management. In project management, we talk about scope creep. In scope creep, we say, we don't want a situation whereby we say we need to test A, B, C, D, E. And during the test, we now are told to test A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. That is going to be a big problem, because that is going to involve more time, more resources, more manpower, more cash. So every scope that is being documented, we must understand that they need to be validated. They need to be approved by the company issuing the pen test attacks. Now, there needs to be strategy. Now, what kind of environment are we going to be testing? Is it going to be known environments? Is it going to be environments we don't know? Now, here, the goal is that you should be able to explain, right? For exams. Here, you should be able to compare and contrast. Now, in the third part of section 1, if you're given a scenario, you want to know the ethical hacking mindset. So in some of your exams, you're going to be asked questions that have to do with you understanding what is the best thing to do, right? Especially when you want to maintain professionalism and integrity. Things like background checks of patient testing team. So each team member must be certified. Each team member must have experience. Each team member must not be a rogue ex-employee in proxy, or might not be somebody that is there not just to protect you, because you see, ethical hacking, which penetration testing is a form of, is actually you giving authorized access to hack a system so that we can protect it. Where about if you give that authorized access to somebody to try to penetrate your system to do vulnerability assessment, but the person's goal is not to protect. The person's goal is to give out this information to your competitors. The person's goal is to give out this information to someone that's ready to buy out that information or get understanding of what your vulnerabilities are. So that's why it's important for us to have a background check. So of course, the ethical hacking mindset is that you must adhere to those scope, those documents, those what to do and what not to do. Identify criminal activity. So there's some, you see, you said, okay, target ABC, they leave out EFGH. And somebody while doing ABC, the person starts doing EFGH. So that is unauthorized access. And the slim line between a hacker and an ethical hacker is authority. A hacker does not have authority. So we say unauthorized access to IT infrastructure to cause harm. Whereas ethical hacking is authorized access. So there's a difference between unauthorized access and authorized access. So another thing is that there's need to be able to immediately report breaches, criminal activity. So these are the mindsets of an ethical hacker, right? Another thing is for professionalism and your integrity, you want to limit the invasiveness based on scope. So most of the times an enterprise environment is not where you want to use every tool in your toolbox. No. So it's not about the number of tools, it's about which tool gets the job done. So like most of the times I'm going to tell my students that cybersecurity is 33% knowledge, concept, theory, understanding, right? Then another 33% tools, right? Tips, techniques. Then another 33% for countermeasures, vulnerability assessment, penetration testing. Then 1% for the bad guys. So you have 93%. So there are some kind of processes you want to explore. You might be looking at what technique can I use. So it's not all of the time you want to go to achieve something within your scope that you're going to run a tool, right? So you want to limit the number of tools that you want to use for your engagement. And of course, you want to maintain confidentiality of data. Then risks to the professional. So you can have a fine. You can have criminal charges if you go against what you have in the scope document. Okay, you are told not to test so environment, so rooms, so server, because maybe there are some proprietary information there, or there's some certain things that they don't want you to test, and you go ahead and do that, you breach that contract, you can have a fine. So these are some of the mindsets that you need to be able to understand. And in your exam, you're going to be tested to see if you're just going to go ahead to choose an answer that is going to compromise professionalism. Then in 2, information gathering and vulnerability scanning. So for every penetration testing, it starts with an audit, it starts with an information gathering, it starts with vulnerability assessment. So that's what you do first before you do penetration testing, because you cannot pen test what you don't know, what you don't understand. Even if it's a blind scan you want to do, you first have to understand what you want to pen test. That is the standard. Now, in module 2, given a scenario, perform passive. So you have active and passive reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is about gathering information. It's about understanding your target. Now, how do you do passive reconnaissance? So you have things like DNS lookup. You have things like technical contacts. Like if you see some applications, some domains, some servers, you're going to see things like billing contacts. At times, you can even find them in SSL, in certificates. You can see some of these technical contacts. Who is going to be responsible for an IP address? Who is responsible for a domain name? You can see some of these things during your reconnaissance. So all of those things that doesn't have to actively engage with the target is called passive reconnaissance. So social media scraping, you could scan social media account and see if you can see employees, see their job listings, see their, because if you see their contracts, their job description, it can give you an idea about what the enterprise looks like and what you should be targeting. Then cryptographic flaws. So what kind of certificates? I've seen sites severally, fixed sites severally that have SSL certificates and still get hacked. And at times, some of these hacks can be from the SSL certificates. At times, it can be from the application itself. So, but you can have some flaws. These days, you could get SSL for typically 0 fee, right? And you see revocation. Then the company's reputation and security posture. So how do you do that? You do that by actually engaging in some reconnaissance. That is going to help you understand how safe, how secured the organization is. And that's what we call security posture. In terms of data, password dumps, you could use Google Docs. You could look at public repository. You can look at website archives. You could look at Wayback Machine. Several ways you could use to actually grab most of this data. And once you're not actively engaged in the enterprise, you can classify all of these as passive reconnaissance. And of course, OSINT comes handy here, because in OSINT, we're talking about open source intelligence gathering. We have quite a lot of other ways to gather information. HUMIT, space intelligence. But here we're looking at, when we say open source, we're talking about information readily available all over the internet, right? So some of the tools that can be used there is Shodan and ReconNG. Some of the common things you want to look at for, it's for common variabilities and exposures. It's also for common weakness enumeration. So there's an archive, there's a database for all of this. So whatever you see, you want to see what is the documentation for that. And that documentation is going to help you understand what kind of tool you can use to attempt to attack in your penetration testing stage. But at this stage, you're just trying to look out for vulnerabilities. In 2.2 here, we're looking at, if you have a scenario, can you perform an active reconnaissance? So in active reconnaissance, we're actually interfacing with hosts, domains, users, applications, URLs, people, right? So here, enumeration comes handy. So when we say enumerate, we want to list, especially things like usernames, not password this time, because when we talk about passwords, that's pen tested. So when we talk about usernames, URL, applications, the list of domains, the list of IP addresses, all of these things are under reconnaissance and footprinting. Now, in enumeration, we want to list these things because, take for instance, you cannot have access to a database, which is hacking, if you don't know the username or the name of the database or the user that have access to the database. Simple logic. So in reconnaissance, you first understand what the username is. You first understand what the website is. You first understand who the users are. You first understand what the URLs are. So when you do this, then you can now proceed to actually the next stage, which is penetration testing. The website reconnaissance. So for websites, what we're trying to do is that can we crawl the website? Can we clone the website? Can we scrap the website? Can we inspect the link? Can we run a tool? Packet crafting, can we use a tool like Scapy? Is a Python-based tool. Can we do defense detection? Can we detect if this application have a firewall? Because if it has a firewall, if it's behind a load balancer, maybe they have a WAF, it might be difficult, and our approach needs to be maybe adapted. Now, because the thing is, if the door to a room that you want to have access to is manned, that is well manned, you have security personnel, it's gated, you have iron bars, it has maybe dogs. So you see layers of security. Your approach is going to be different. And that's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to detect what kind of defense that you have. So, because if you see some websites, they have security SSL installed. So you cannot try to maybe, or it's going to be a longer haul for you if you want to try to do packet inspection to like pick the packets going between the browser and the server. That's going to be a long haul for you. So there's a difference there. So what about the application itself? What about the people that deploy the application? What about backups for that application? So you see, there are different layers. So to fortify a system, you have various means of defense. So here we want to first understand what are the kind of defense that we have. Then, of course, tokens, then scoping, issuing, revocation, what type of tokens that is being implemented, of course, also what kind of encryption that we have implemented. Then what diving here, we're trying to go through the enterprise to see if we can get their Wi-Fi accounts and all of that. Then for network traffic, we want to see if we can capture that, if we can see API request and what the response is, especially if this application is piggybacking on another application. And when that happens, that's only when you have an API implemented. Then cloud asset discoveries. So these days you have Google Cloud Platform, that was GCP, you have Azure by Microsoft, you have AWS platforms. Very clear example is Amazon S3. S3 is going to be, it's like the storage service for AWS. That is a simple storage service. That is S3. Simple storage service. That is S3. S in 3 places. Now, that can be discovered. So you have cloud application discovery tools and application. They also will have third-party hosted services. So what are other third-party applications that is being hosted? Is there a way something is implemented like a WAF, like a throttling script that will limit applications or tools from detecting an environment? Take, for instance, you see some application where you try to, if you're doing something like a brute force attack or you're trying to log in, make some login attempts, it's going to detect that something is trying to do what is irregular, and it's going to block you off. You want to understand, you want to have an understanding of all of this. And that's what you learn in scenario, perform, active reconnaissance. So in any of these scenarios, can you do reconnaissance? Then, given a scenario, analyze the result of a reconnaissance exercise. That's where software development skill set, that's where cloud computing skill set, that's where networking especially skill set comes handy. Because it's not enough to be able to use a tool. You can pick up a tool and learn how to use it in 10 minutes, and you run the tool. But the point is that it's going to bring out a result. Once it brings out a result, the question is, can you interpret? Can you tell what the tool is saying? Can you pick that result and take it to another tool and continue your exercise? So footprinting for operating systems, things like what is the version of the operating system? What are the vulnerabilities, the network, the devices, the software? What results are we going to have when we do a DNS lookup? Can we understand that when we call a website? Can we save it? Can we understand the language that the website was built on? Same thing for network traffic, same thing for ARP traffic. address resolution protocol works together with DHCP server to assign IP addresses to nodes on the network and also resolve those IP addresses. When we do an Nmap scan and it brings us the open port, the closed port, helps us draw a topology. The question is, can we analyze the result? Because in your exam, you are going to be needing to interpret. Okay, same thing for web logs. Most of the times when you have an attack on an application, the first thing a vulnerability assessment analyst or the first thing a penetration tester wants to do is to go to the server to see the logs. And that log can tell you, most times the log is going to say at time so this happened, and maybe this is the result or whatever. So we're going to do some of these things in the course of the training. Now, another thing is, given the scenario, perform vulnerability scanning. So here now, you're not just understanding, you're not explaining, you want to be able to perform vulnerability scanning. Now, how do you perform vulnerability scanning when you have some scenarios, when you have time to run scan? Maybe you just have 2 minutes. There's some scans that are going to take you quite a while, right? So if you run a particular scan, at times you're going to get results. But the question is, how soon can you get it? If you're testing for some protocols, so you should be able to understand plain text protocols and secure protocols. You should be able to understand your network topology. You should be able to understand if you have a bandwidth limitation. Take, for instance, an organization that doesn't have more than 10 MB per second for the entire 10, 15 systems. So it's going to limit how you're going to be running your scan, because the more scan you run, you're going to be limiting how much bandwidth is left for them to do their stuff. Don't forget, we talked about scope, we talked about rules of engagement. It comes handy here because the time you have to run your scan, it's going to tell, if you have 1 month, for instance, so it's easy for you to plan off-peak periods and run your scan. If you have 3 days to run your scan, that means you have to run 247, you're going to run around the clock. But the question is, can you run your scan and people still work? Query throttling. So can you throttle, can you like queue up your queries? They're fragile systems. You have some systems that maybe they don't have so much RAM, they don't have so much processor speed, they cannot take so much heavy load. So these are different considerations. Then assets that are not traditional. They can be bespoke, they can be custom, they can be proprietary devices. Then, of course, you have how do you set scans to avoid detection? How do you identify targets? Then you have different types of scans. Scans that are going to be in stealth mode. When we say stealth, so most of the times comes from the military, stealth or covert operations. So how do we do a scan and not to be detected? Because when you're doing a scan, you're going to have anti-malware, intrusion prevention system, intrusion detection systems. They are out there on the enterprise. So how do you scan and make sure that you are not found, that it does not drop an alert? Even very, very simplistic anti-malwares or device monitoring systems or SEMS, you are going to have maybe HIDS, a host intrusion prevention system. And once it senses a kind of scan, it will drop an alert and even stop the scan from happening. So you want to learn how to conduct a stealth scan. So a stealth scan is going to fragment the scan before sending out the packets so that it doesn't go in one swing. It goes in piecemeal. Then, of course, TCP connect scan. Credentials are not credential scans. So when credentials, we mean we have some things like usernames, we might have the password. And at times we're doing our scans, we don't have anything. We just try to do our scanning and the rest. So that's how you classify each of these scans. So in the training, this is going to be properly differentiated. You want to learn how to do that in any of the scenarios. And of course, Nmap, Network Mapper, a very awesome tool that you could use for network scanning. So most applications are going to be on a network. Most cloud applications are going to be on a network. Most network are already a network. So in penetration testing, networking comes so handy. So all of the common options, -A, SV, ST, PN, O. So when you want to segment your scan, or when you want to fragment your scan, when you want to do operating system discovery, when you want to do a complete scan, when you want to do a pink sweep. These are the different type of scans you could do with Nmap. So how do you do that? And of course, what are some of the testing tools you can use to facilitate automation? Now, in Module 3, we're going to be looking at attacks and exploits. So I'm trying to explain the content of the penetration testing curriculum. So if you understand this content, the next thing we're going to do is to pick out the objectives. And I'm going to give you a kind of shortcut, a kind of a quick way to like go through this content, have a grasp of everything so that for your exam, you can pass it in one sitting. For attacks and exploits, here we are saying the goal while we are engaged is to make sure that we can detect most of these attacks, either they've happened in the time past, which is called threat hunting, or they are about to happen, or they have happened already. At times we say digital forensics. So given a scenario, research attack vectors and perform network attacks. So here we are doing stress testing for availability. So when you talk about stress, just like building engineers are going to do stress testing for a building, your cloth, you can have your cloth, you want to check how much stress it can take, how far can you stretch it. Same thing, you want to look at how well can some of these IT systems cope with stress, cope with some of this attack. A very classical example is when we discuss denial of service or distributed denial of service. A simplistic thing like a bandwidth, maybe you have a 501 error. If you have a lot of targets, a lot of attack, can your system cope? Then exploit resources. So we have packet storm, we have a very nice one, which is the exploit database. Very, very handy. I think some of the students doing the cybersecurity internship program we have, I've interested in joining the cybersecurity internship program. It's a 3 months, 4 months period of training. It covers networking, web programming for security analysts, covers pen testing, that's CompTIA PenTest. It also covers the Cisco Cyber Ops certification, and covers, recently we are adding, for the next batch, we are adding portfolio development, CV, and also project management, because these skills come handy for a pen tester, for a security analyst. So very, very, very important. The attacks. So we have different types of attacks. So for a pen tester, it should be, for any kind of target that you are given, you should understand which kind of attack that is possible. Or if you're given a platform, you should know what type of attack that platform is going to be susceptible to. So ARP, for instance, for a network, exploit chaining, password attacks, on-path or man-in-the-middle, cyber DNS catching, poisoning, virtual, LAN area, network hopping. So all of these are different types of attacks that you're going to have. So for each of them, you should be able to understand the scenario in which this can happen. And some of the tools we're going to be using is Metasploit and Netcat and Nmap. Then we have talked about networks. Let's talk about wireless. So a pen tester should have some knowledge about different types of attack, different types of domain, different types of assets, and how to conduct pen testing, especially for wireless, for network, for cloud, for web, and for systems. Now here we're looking at attack methods. So what are the different types of attacks? So we have eavesdropping, data modification, data corruption, relay attacks, spoofing. In our next series, we're going to be considering each and every one of these details. So right now, I'm doing an overview, right? Attacks evil twin, when you have two wireless network acting like they are same, and one is used to collect information. Captive portal, where a network is implemented in the sense that the password can be free, but people get to now see a login screen by the time they have access to it. They have bluejacking for Bluetooth, you have blue snapping, you have RFID cloning, you have all of these attacks. You should be able to understand them and understand their different scenarios. And these are associated with wireless attacks. And of course, we're going to be using aircraft NG and the amplified antenna. And you can't do this if you're not using an adapter that can turn the wireless NIC card into promiscuous mode. So in the course of the training, we're going to be exploring this in great detail. Now, another thing we want to look at when it comes to attacks is we want to look at application-based attacks. So both desktop application, web application, and times cloud applications. So you need to understand the OWASP top 10. So the OWASP top 10 is the Open Web Application Security Projects, right? So, and the Open Web, or time to say Open Worldwide Web or Open WW Application Security Project atomize list of things that, you know, most of the times, that's why we normally say that cybersecurity is on top of every layer or every other layer in tech. So you're doing your web programmer, cybersecurity is above it. With network engineer, cybersecurity is above it. Or you are a data analyst, cybersecurity is above it. Take for instance, SEM. SEM is a combination of data analytics and cybersecurity. So in trying to protect our IT systems, it's important that penetration testers have good understanding of these underlying technologies, because your goal is to protect these things, and you can't protect what typically you can't actually set up, or you don't understand the technology behind it. So OWASP top 10 have to do with web applications. So we're saying, what are the things that we need to be able to, look out for if we are setting up our application? So there are 10 items. We'll consider them in the course of the training. So we'll look at server-side request forgery, business logic flaws, injection attacks, SQL very, very handy, and the different types. Then we have application vulnerabilities. We have API attacks. API attacks for any application that is going to be, like I said, piggybacking on another application. We have directory transversal, so common. We're going to look at some of these attacks. We're going to be looking at average about 50 labs throughout the training session, right? So some of the tools that we can be using to do this is directory buster. This can help us do directory transversal. This can help us to look at the different directories, maybe hidden or open in the application. SQL map for testing applications that are database driven. Bob suits for doing vulnerability assessment, for penetration testing for web applications. OWASP app for also doing vulnerability assessment and penetration testing for web application. Okay. So let's look at the next item. Given a scenario, you want to be able to understand and research attack vectors and perform attacks on cloud technology. Now, you see, we've seen network, we've seen web, we've seen wireless. We're not talking about cloud. You see why I said cybersecurity is on top of every other of these items. Now, there are different types of attacks when it comes to cloud. So you have quite a lot of them: credential harvesting, privilege escalation, account takeover, metadata service attacks. So all of these items, we explore them in the course of the training. Then we have some of the tools that can be used is your typical software development kit. And of course, there are some cloud applications that can be used. Some cloud-based applications that can be used to do host discovery, can be used to do credential harvesting, especially for those that are readily available, that can help us to actually understand cloud infrastructure. Now you have 3.5 common attacks and vulnerabilities against specialized systems. Now you see that, I believe sometime this year, maybe late in the year, we're going to have PenTest PT0-003. In 003, you can see the curriculum expanded to take care of these stuff, especially for IoT and cloud, to take care of them as very, very detailed module. Because one thing with certifications are going to grow according to need. They are going to grow according to the type of attacks we have in those domains. So you see, most of these things now are lumped together. So you should be able to explain them, right? So you should be able to explain the kind of attacks you have in mobile, you have in Internet of Things, you have in different devices. At times you have mobile device management softwares, you have in industrial systems, you have in virtual environments. So you should be able to explain them, right? So you also have data storage systems, vulnerability. What are the kind of, you're able to explain the kind of vulnerabilities that you have in containerized workloads. Some of the tools that we're going to be using here is Bobsfield, Droza, the MOB SF, I mentioned it earlier on, Postman, especially for APIs, Ethercap, then Frida. Then in 3.6, we want to be able to perform social engineering. On the channel, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. I have a series that I've started. It's on social engineering, identity theft, and OSINT. I've begun a series in this area, and because social engineering has to do with that human nature, people being exploited, and if you have the best IT systems, without proper training, without people understanding what they should do and what they shouldn't do, I bet you're going to have a very compromised system. We want to understand what are the different types of attack that we can have, and how do we ensure that we have a very secure system. So you have things like that are going to be done remotely, some things that are going to be physical, some things that are going to, we can use a tool, we can use a script, we can create our own script ourselves. In the last series, I started creating some scripts that we can use to do phishing, and this is possible. And in any of the scenarios, you should be able to understand how do you differentiate tailgating, dumpster diving, shoulder surfing, and batch cloning. Each of these can be exploited for bigger goals in pen testing or in hacking. And one of the ways you can know that this is social engineering is authority, scarcity, social proof. Social proof is saying, yes, I just got access to system ABC given to me by the accountant. I will need access to system DEF. You see, the person is trying to make you see that, yes, even the accountant have given access, so you should give access. When you see some sort of urgency, likeness, some people can have a relationship for a period just to do what? Collect information. And social engineering has to do with getting unauthorized access, getting information that the person, the hacker, is not meant to have by exploiting just humans. Nothing technical here. But technical means can be used to like create, can be used to collect this information, especially when you're using the BIF, or you're using some toolkits, or you're using some applications, or you're creating a script, or you're creating a link that can be sent out and information can be collected. Or you create a site is being cloned, and people are directed to that particular site that looks like the original site, and data is being stolen. 3.7 is post-exploitation techniques. So the question is that when there's an exploit, what kind of techniques can happen after that? So we understand concepts or some tools like Empire, Mimikatz, like Bloodhound, pass the hash, different types of escalation. When is it horizontal? When is it vertical? Network segmentation testing. So this has to do with we are putting our network in boxes. Let me put it that way. Something of this nature. You say, I have this, I have this, I have this, right? I have this. So this is going to be maybe a department, a department, a department, a department. They can be somehow be linked, right? So if you have different segments of our network, and the beauty about this network segments is that they can actually help us have a better secured system. And if we have a better secured system, one thing we can do is to test it. We can check for it and see if we have vulnerability. We can actually get into. Then, of course, in terms of privilege escalation here, we're looking at, you have a user and a user, you have a user and an admin. So when it's going from a low to a high, it's called a vertical, right? Some kind of upward. And when it is between two same level, like admin or user, maybe account takeover, you call that horizontal privilege escalation. Of course, upgrading a restricted shell, creating a foothold, Trojan, backdoor, all of these concepts are what you should be able to perform. Techniques avoidance. So if someone is to do something, how do you kind of avoid being detected? So that's where living off the land, data exfiltration, covering your tracks, steganography. Steganography is hiding files, right? It's another word for, and the file can be a text, it can be image, it can be PDFs, it can be anything. Establishing a covert channel so that it's still you're not found. Then things like list of these items can be enumerated, can be gotten. Okay. Then the next item in the curriculum that we should be able to understand is reporting and communication. Okay, so as we look at reporting and communication, so this is where project management skills comes in. This is where things that are actually not technical, but they come handy if you're going to do vulnerability assessment, if you're going to do penetration testing. So the idea is, if you need to conduct this kind of tests on enterprise infrastructure, you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to do some writings. You need to be able to prepare some documentations for all of the things you're going to do. And because you are communicating to persons that might not have technical, or a mix of persons that have technical and non-technical skill set, then you need to understand how to do some of these reports. So here we want to first compare and contrast important components of written reports. Now, in vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, what we call VAPT, it's not where you use verbal, right? So most things have to be documented. So, and some of your audience are going to be the C-suite executives. That's to say that your C-level executives, your chief executive officer, your chief medical director, your chief finance officer, your chief technology officer, all of those C-level, right? Your directorate level, or your CISO, chief information security officer, all of those guys are who you're going to be reporting to. And at times, you're going to be reporting to third-party stakeholders. At times, you're reporting to developers. At times, you're reporting to developers. You are saying, okay, developer, this is what we found out, this is what we found out. And at times, some of the scope of your penetration testing is going to involve not just only doing the vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, but also involving you recommending what needs to be done. And if you're recommending what needs to be done, that means you should be addressing that to the developers or third party who is in charge of whatever. Now, your report content is going to be things like executive summary. In the course of the training sessions and some of our labs and hands-on, we're going to be exploring some of the samples of this vulnerability assessment, right? You should have an executive summary that tells an overview of everything that was done, what you found out, what are the top 1, 2, 3 items that we can get out from all of this stuff. Your scope, what were you commissioned to do? How did you do it? What did you find? What are some of the metrics and how did you measure them? What are some of the remediation to these things you found out? What's the conclusion? Appendix, where you're going to have images, illustrations, software, screenshots, and the rest. Storage time for reports, secure distribution, note-taking, common theme, root cause analysis. So these are very, very crucial in your reporting and communication module. Now here we're going to be looking at, if we have a scenario, can we analyze the findings and recommend the appropriate remediation within a report? Now, every report is going to have, you don't just do penetration testing or do a vulnerability assessment and you just throw the documents to them without telling them this is what we found out, or this is what we're going to do, or this is what your solution is going to be. So most of the times, even when the scope does not involve a great deal of fixing it, you should give a bird's eye view of, like an overview of what needs to be done, give or take. So some of them are going to be what we call security controls. And security controls most of the times are divided into three major areas: technical controls, administrative controls, and physical controls. And at times, we can break administrative controls into two. So we now have administrative controls and operational controls. And when we talk about system technical controls, here we're looking at what are the technical stuffs, systems, softwares, applications that we can implement to try to protect our system and remediate what have happened or what might happen in the future. Then in administrative control, here we're saying, what can management do? Right? And in physical control, we are also saying, what are the items we can fix within the facility to help us protect our systems? And the recommendations you are going to be giving is going to be from within, or a combination of most of these controls. Now, here we want to look at the importance of communication. Now, communication is so, because at times you can be doing your pen test and something goes wrong. So you should have some kind of primary point of contact. You should have some technical contact if there's an emergency. Imagine you are testing an application, even when you're throttling or when you are not sending so much traffic to, and the application is flat, and you have tens of thousands of clients that are using that particular application, and even when you're testing on an off-peak period. So who is going to bring back the application? That's why I see most maintenance, most vulnerability assessment, pen testings are going to be done on off-peak periods, except there's something that we're looking for and we need to do it within work hours or during peak periods. So most of the time it's going to be times when there's the lowest traffic on those systems. And if something happens, who's going to bring back that system back on track? So that's where the technical contact, emergency, if there's any issues. And at times, some of these systems you are testing are third party. The company does not own it 100%. So you should be able to itemize your critical findings, your reports, and indicate their status. Then tell of indicators of prior compromise. So if you see it, you should say it. So that's the standard. If you find something that is a compromise that have been there before you even started your stuff, or while you're trying to work on your stuff, you should inform the organization. So these are standards. Situational awareness, de-escalation. You don't want them to be afraid. You don't want them to get jittery over some things that might be grave but might not be so harmful, or we might not cause so much pain. The confliction, then false positive. Normally, I would tell students the binary way to look at these things. When you have a true false, you don't want a situation whereby something is false and you're calling it true. You don't want to have a situation whereby something is true and you're calling it false. So criminal activity, if you see such kind of thing within an enterprise, you must communicate that. So there is great importance in communicating that. And you're going to see your exam, you should be able to demonstrate your strength. You should be able to demonstrate how well you can do that. Then, of course, you want to prioritize your findings. And at times, you might be reprioritizing your goal. Your goal is actually what is in your scope document. We said, okay, we're going to test the web application and the network within the facility. Then a time can come, we might need to reprioritize based on what we are finding. But it then means that we need to do some change management. We need to go back to the scope, adjust that before we ride on. Okay, post-report delivery activities. So removing shells of applications, tools, and credentials that you've actually used to perform your attack. You want to remove that. You want to make sure the client accepts. Because in project management, for instance, we say the project is complete only when the project is accepted and deemed delivered. Also lessons learned. You can also check out This is just by the way. You can check out the channel. You're going to see a complete series on the Project Management Institute. That's the PMI. The training is based on PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge. It will help you understand some of the project management aspects of this course. Okay. So let's look at code tools and code analysis. So we're trying to look at the curriculum, see what we're trying to learn, what we're going to get at the end of this course. So in tool and code analysis, there are a few things that we need to understand as pen testers. Here, the idea is to be able to explain and understand the different scripting and software development processes, life cycle, structures, types, differences. Now, yes, the idea is not for you to be a badass programmer, but you must understand this concept, because that would tell if people are you're able to tell when people are creating secured code or unsecured code. And normally there's what we call the software development life cycle on the channel. On the channel, there's a video that I detailed what the software development life cycle is all about. I will leave the description. I'll leave a link in the description of this video. Now, different persons are going to be responsible for a site being secured, from the designer to the developer to the quality assurance to the tester, to different persons. But if we're actually going to look at this code, analyze it, and see if they are secured, we need to understand some of these concepts. So things like logic constructs, things like data structures, things like libraries, framework, classes, procedures, functions. They are very crucial in us understanding this concept as regards software development. Okay, so here also, given the scenario, analyze the script. So you should be able to differentiate between a bash, a PowerShell, that is bash, PowerShell, a Python, a Ruby, a Perl, JavaScript, maybe a PHP code. Now, for this curriculum, for this exam, so you limit yourself to bash and PowerShell, Python, Ruby, Perl, and JavaScript code. Now, there are some scripts that are going to be written for several purposes. Some of them are going to be to download files, that's data exfiltration, that is to exfiltrate data, to collect data from the site, maybe to launch remote access. I've seen one in one of the jobs, one of the tasks we did a few weeks ago, where we saw a PHP script. It was responsible for defacing a particular website and uploading uploading a particular file on the homepage of the website. Now, enumerate users, enumerate assets. Then opportunities for automation. Automated pen testing process is going to be you using some kind of softwares or tools to perform some kind of scan and to check configurations of systems, and also to get yourself a report. Then this report is going to now form part of the report you are going to create for your client. Okay, what else again? So here you want to explain the use case of the following tools during the phase of penetration testing. Now, the intent of this objective is not to test specific vendor feature sets. No. The idea is that you want to understand what each and every one of these tools, what they do, how they do it, and the kind of results they get you, and what you can use with such kind of results. Take, for instance, when you use WHOIS to get an information, you can go ahead to now use that information on NSLOOKUP. You can use that particular information, move over to the harvester. You can use that particular information to now go to Showdown. You can use that particular information and now go to Multigo. You can use that particular information from Multigo to go to Census to check server configurations and the rest. Now, for each of these tools, you want to know what is NICTO, what is OpenVAS, what is SQL Map. Like, as we go on in the training, you're able to understand each and every one of them and their case studies. Very critical, because in your exam, you're going to see a question like, okay, you have so scenario, you have this issue, you have this case study, what tool is going to be able to use to be able to solve this particular problem? Because the idea is not you trying to use the tool, is can you use the tool to solve a problem? So you have credential testing tools, you have wireless, you have OSINT, you have networking, you have several other miscellaneous tools, you have steganography tools, then you have web application tools, cloud tools. Like most of these cloud tools are going to be able to help you to do reconnaissance, do footprinting, do enumeration for cloud infrastructure. Then you have debuggers, quite a lot of them. Okay, so that's the end of the curriculum description. I hope it was not so long. I took my time to break down the entire concept of the pen test PT0-002 curriculum. The next thing we're going to be doing in the training is to going to pick each of the objectives and break them down. Then subsequently, we're going to pick labs, average 10 to 15 labs in each of the modules, and get ready for the exams. So thank you very much. See you in the next training series.